You have been watching Transformers your entire life, and there is one thing you have always known without ever being told. Blue means Autobot, red means Decepticon. What the lore actually reveals is that this is not a paint job or a uniform, it is a vital sign, and once you understand what it is measuring, the entire war looks different. Start with what everyone knows. The original 1984 Transformers cartoon built its visual language on contrasts. The Autobots transformed from ordinary vehicles into heroic defenders. The Decepticons transformed from weapons into weapons again. And when the cameras pulled in close, when the animators wanted you to know who was safe, and who was dangerous, they painted it in the most fundamental human visual language there is. Blue for the ones worth trusting, red for the ones worth fearing. This was not a design choice, it was a declaration. Blue eyes read as calm, as controlled, as aligned with something larger than the self. Red eyes read as hostile, as burning, as something that wants. The human brain processes these colors at a level below language, below conscious thought, and the animators of the original cartoon understood that. They were speaking to children, and children understand eyes before they understand words. But here's the part nobody sits with long enough. The rule held. Across 30 episodes of a first season, across a second season, across the 1986 film, across the comics running simultaneously in Marvel's publishing line, the rule held with a consistency that is almost eerie in retrospect. Autobots blue, Decepticons red. Every time, without exception, in every significant close-up and battle sequence and quiet moment. The exceptions are what prove it. Shockwave. In the G1 cartoon and comics, Shockwave has a single cyclopean eye and it burns cold yellow. Not red, not blue, yellow like a searchlight, like something that measures rather than feels. The design is not an accident. Shockwave is the Decepticon who operates without Megatron's approval, who holds Cybertron in their absence, who functions on pure logic with all emotion excised. His eye color is not faction. It is something older and stranger and more dangerous than faction. It is what you look like when the war has stripped you of everything except function. And then there is Unicron. Unicron's eyes burn orange and gold, a color that belongs to neither faction, that belongs instead to something so vast and so ancient that the Autobot-Decepticon binary is irrelevant to it. Unicron is not a Decepticon. Unicron is something that 8 worlds before either faction existed. His eye color does not obey the rule because Unicron did not emerge from the same source. He is the first hint that eye color in this universe is not about which side you chose. It is about what you fundamentally are. Pay attention to that. It matters for everything that comes next. The question the original cartoon never asked out loud, but which every continuity after it would eventually have to answer, is this: why those colors? What in the biologies or the metaphysics of a transformer produces a blue optical sensor versus a red one? Is it a setting? Is it a choice? Is it something that can change? The aligned continuity, which includes the Prime animated series, the War for Cybertron and Fall of Cybertron video games, and the novels produced alongside them, gave the first real answer. And the answer is Energon, not Energon in the simple sense of fuel. Energon in the deeper sense that the aligned continuity developed more fully than any continuity before it. Energon is the lifeblood of Cybertron. It is what the Allspark produces, what Transformers process to survive, what powers their sparks at the most fundamental level. And Energon comes in different grades, different purities, different alignments. Standard Energon sustains, refined Energon amplifies. And Dark Energon, the substance the aligned continuity identifies as the literal blood of Unicron, corrupts. Picture this. You are standing in the depths of Cybertron, in a chamber that was sealed before the war began, before most living Transformers were forged. The walls are covered in Cybertronian glyphs so old that the scholars who could read them have been dead for 1,000,000 years. In the center of the chamber there is a seam in the floor, and from that seam there is leaking a substance that is the wrong color. Standard Energon glows blue-white, clean and cold and alive. This substance is purple-black, and it does not glow so much as it absorbs, pulling the light in around it rather than producing its own. You do not need to read the ancient glyphs to understand that this is something that should not exist on Cybertron, that it came from somewhere else, that it was placed here by something that wanted a door into this world. This is Dark Energon, and what happens to a Transformer who absorbs it is not a change in faction. It is a change in what they are made of, down to the spark. The aligned continuity is explicit about this. Dark Energon corrupts the spark itself, not just the systems. A Transformer processing Dark Energon is having something fundamental altered inside them, and that alteration is visible. The optical sensors change. Not dramatically, not all at once, but measurably in ways that cannot be reversed by simply removing the source. The color change is not metaphorical, it is physical. The eyes are showing you what is happening inside. This reframes the entire blue-red binary in a single piece of information. If eye color tracks spark state, then the Autobots were not designed with blue eyes and the Decepticons with red. They started the same, somewhere in the history of Cybertron, and something happened to make them different. Something at the level of what they were fueled by, what they believed in, what the war asked of them, changed the light behind their eyes. And here is what that actually means. The Decepticons were not born different. They became different. And the question of how much of that becoming was chosen, and how much was inflicted, is the most uncomfortable question in Transformers lore. The IDW publishing Transformers comics, particularly the runs produced in the years following 2012, are the most psychologically sophisticated storytelling the franchise has ever produced. More than meets the eye, and Robots in Disguise treat Cybertron's civil war the way the best human war literature treats conflict, as something that deforms everyone it touches, that creates wounds that do not close, that makes the question of who is right and who is wrong genuinely complicated in ways that resist easy resolution. In that continuity, optical sensor color is not immutable, it shifts. Characters who defect from one faction to another, characters who spend years carrying a trauma that reshapes who they are at the most fundamental level, characters who have been physically altered by the war in ways they did not consent to, show those changes in their eyes. Not always immediately, not always dramatically, but the IDW continuity understands that if the eyes are a window into the spark, then a spark that has changed will eventually show it. Think about what that means for the act of defection. When a Decepticon crosses over to the Autobots, they are not just changing their insignia. They are making a claim about who they are at the level of their spark, and the question the IDW continuity asks is whether that claim is true yet, whether the shift is complete, whether the eyes will follow. Some defectors carry their old color for a long time, some never fully change, and that ambiguity is not a continuity error. It is the most honest thing the franchise has ever said about what it costs to change who you are after you have been shaped by something that dark for that long. The defectors also ask the question from the other direction. Autobots who fall, who are captured and subjected to reprogramming, who spend too long in environments saturated with dark energon or corrupting influence, begin to show the shift. The blue does not vanish overnight. It shifts by degrees, cooler first, then something harder, then something that reads differently to anyone paying attention. The eyes are the warning. The eyes are telling you what the words are not yet saying. Here is the part nobody talks about. In multiple IDW stories, characters study each other's eyes specifically for this reason, not as a romantic gesture, as a diagnostic. You look at someone's optical sensors when you are not sure whether the thing standing in front of you is still the person you knew, or something that has been done to them in ways they cannot articulate. The eyes tell you before the words do. And in a war this long between beings who have known each other for millions of years, that kind of looking is not paranoia. It is survival. Picture this, Cybertron before the war. Not the dead metal husk of the battlefield years. Not the ruined golden spires half submerged in metallic ash. Not the world that two armies have been consuming for millions of years. The world before. A civilization that had been building itself for longer than human life has existed on Earth, with art forms and philosophies and architectural traditions that made the oldest human cultures look like sketches. A world lit from beneath by the planet's own energon veins, blue-white light filtering up through titanium streets, catching the optical sensors of millions of inhabitants and reflecting back in that same clean, cold, alive color. They all had the same eyes. This is not confirmed explicitly in most continuities, but the logic demands it. If eye color tracks spark state, and spark state tracks what you are fueled by, and what you believe, and what the war has done to you, then before the war, before the corruption, before the ideology that would shatter Cybertron into two factions and eventually into ruin, they were the same. The Transformer who would become Optimus Prime, and the Transformer who would become Megatron, were both products of the same world, the same planet, the same civilization, the same source of energon. Whatever differences existed between them were differences of circumstance and philosophy, not differences encoded in the light behind their eyes. There was a moment when that changed. The aligned continuity places that moment in the political collapse that preceded the war, in the caste system that the pre-war government enforced, and that the future Megatron's early movement challenged. In the War for Cybertron novel, the future Decepticon leader is already writing manifestos between gladiatorial bouts in Kaon, articulating a genuine political grievance about equality that the Autobot establishment refused to hear. He was not wrong. The Cybertronian caste system was a genuine injustice, and the being who would become the greatest villain in the franchise's history started out making arguments that were not villainous. He started out making arguments that were right, and something happened between that beginning and the red-eyed destroyer. Something corrupted, or was corrupted, or chose corruption so thoroughly that by the time Megatron stood on Cybertron with the war in full motion, Whatever his optical sensors had looked like before, they looked like burning coals now. When did it change? Was it a single moment, a decision so total that it left a mark on the spark itself? Was it gradual, a degree here and a degree there across years of escalating violence? Until one morning he looked in a reflective surface and the blue was gone and he could not remember exactly when it had left? Was it dark energon, absorbed through the violence of the gladiatorial pits, through the first kills, through the specific moment when a justified grievance became a willingness to do anything to anyone? The central question is not who has blue eyes and who has red. The central question is this: if eye color reflects the true state of the spark, then is any transformer in this war still exactly who they were when it began? And if not, what does it mean that the war changed all of them, down to the light behind their eyes? The live-action film series does not have the lore density of the G1 comics or the psychological depth of the IDW runs. It is a different kind of storytelling, and it has different tools. But one of those tools, used with more intention than its critics tend to credit, is Optimus Prime's eyes. In the first Transformers film, Optimus Prime's eyes are a clear, deep blue. They are warm. They are the eyes of someone who still believes that the choice between good and evil is navigable, that there is a right side and that being on it is enough, that the war has a comprehensible shape and an eventual end that does not require him to become something unrecognizable. By Age of Extinction and The Last Knight, something has changed. The exact shade is harder to characterize. It is still nominally blue, but it is colder. The warmth that read as leadership in the first film has been replaced by something that reads more like endurance, and in the moments of those films where the Autobot commander does things that would have been unthinkable in the early entries, the camera holds on the eyes, and what is there is not the blue of hope. It is the blue of a being who has been carrying something too heavy for too long and has started to show it. The most extreme version of this is in The Last Knight, where Optimus, fully under Quintessa's control, has eyes that are purple-violet, a color that belongs to no faction, that reads as corruption in the deepest sense the franchise has established. This is not a casual design choice. The film is telling you something specific. This is not the Autobot commander anymore in any meaningful sense. The spark has been overridden. The eyes are showing you what has been done to him. And then, when he breaks free, when the connection to a companion reaches through the programming and touches something in the spark that Quintessa could not fully erase, the eyes shift back. Not immediately, in stages. Purple to cold, blue to the blue that was his original color, and every step of that shift is tracked by the camera with more care than most of the film's other emotional beats combined. The filmmakers understood something. They may not have been able to articulate the full lore architecture behind it, but they understood intuitively that the eyes were the story. When you need to know whether someone is still the person they were, you look at their eyes. And the color tells you. Across all the major continuities, there is a consistent visual choice for something worse than red eyes, worse than corrupted purple, worse than anything that still burns with some kind of intention. There are eyes that have gone dark. Not dark as in shadowed or dimmed, dark as in absent. Pitch black, or colorless, or the gray of metal without light. The optical sensors present but not producing anything, recording but not perceiving, taking in light but no longer processing it into experience. These are the eyes of the dead. In G1, when Autobots and Decepticons fall in battle, the animation telegraphs their death primarily through stillness, and sometimes through the eyes, going to a default gray or black, the color of metal with no energon behind it. It is brief, often not dwelt on, appropriate for a children's cartoon. But the signal is consistent enough that the audience understood it. When the light leaves the eyes, the spark is left too. The IDW comics take this further. In the more mature storytelling of their later runs, the absence of optical sensor light is treated with the gravity it deserves. Characters who have had their sparks extinguished are visually distinct from characters who are simply deactivated or in stasis. Stasis looks like sleep, like a shutdown, like something that might resume. Spark death looks like nothing. The eyes are open and empty, present and absent simultaneously, and there is nothing more unnerving in the franchise's visual vocabulary than a familiar face with those eyes. This is what makes eye color in Transformers something richer than a faction marker. It is a spectrum. At one end, the clean blue-white of a spark in full health and alignment. Moving through the spectrum, the cooler blue of a being under strain, the harder blue of one who has been broken and is holding together through will rather than ease. Into the mixed territory, the yellows and oranges of beings outside the normal order, the calculated emptiness of a Cyclops Decepticon logician, the consuming hunger of a planetary destroyer. Then the Decepticon red, which the lore establishes is not evil's natural color, but what happens to a spark that has been fueled by resentment and violence and dark energon for long enough that those things have become its resting state. Into the corrupted territory, the purple and violet of direct external control, the spark overridden rather than changed by choice. And at the far end, the absence, the nothing, the color of a spark that is no longer there. Every point on that spectrum tells you something. Not just what side a transformer is on, but what has happened to them, what they are carrying, what the war has done to them at the level where they cannot hide it even if they want to. Here is what the lore actually says. And once you understand it, the whole war looks different. Transformers are not machines in any meaningful sense of the word. They are mechanical in form, yes. They transform, they run on energon, they process information through systems that a human engineer might recognize as technology. But inside each one is a spark, and the spark is not a power source. Every continuity that has engaged with the question at any depth has come to the same conclusion. The spark is a soul, an ancient, irreplaceable consciousness that was generated by Primus, or has existed in some form since the beginning of Cybertronian existence, depending on which continuity you are following. But in every version, the spark is what makes a transformer alive in the way that matters. When a transformer dies, a spark goes out. Not a system shuts down, not a machine stops functioning. A soul ends. An irreplaceable being who may have lived for millions of years, who has seen Cybertron its golden age and its ruin, who has fought and loved and believed and changed across a span of time that dwarfs human history, ends. The emptiness behind the eyes is the visual record of that ending. And if the spark is a soul, then eye color is conscience, not in the simple moral sense. Not just a display of whether you have done good things or bad things. In a more fundamental sense, the state of the soul, what you have been fueled by. What you have chosen, what has been done to you, what you have survived, what the war has cost you at the deepest level. All of it visible, if you know how to read it, in the light the eyes produce. This is why the moments of color change in the franchise carry such disproportionate weight. When a leader's eyes go cold, it is not a costume change, it is evidence. When a Decepticon defects and their eyes take years to fully shift, it is not a continuity error. It is an honest admission that you cannot just decide to change what you are at the spark level. The decision is the beginning, not the completion. The eyes tell you when the completion has happened, or whether it ever will. Picture this. A Decepticon who has been fighting this war for 3 million years decides to cross over. She walks into an Autobot compound under a flag of truce, and the Autobots around her look at her eyes. They are red. Not the burning, intent red of someone in the middle of rage or battle, but the deep, settled red of someone who has been carrying that color for so long it has become structural, part of how they see the world rather than a response to anything specific. The Autobots who have seen enough defectors know what this means. She means it today in this moment, but the eyes will take time. The change she is making in her spark has to become real before it becomes visible. Some of them will wait and watch and wonder if the color ever shifts. Some of them will never fully trust her until it does. And she knows this, and she has decided to make the change anyway, with no guarantee that the visible evidence will ever catch up to the internal reality. That is what it costs to switch sides in a war this old. Not just danger, not just exile from your former faction. It costs you the certainty that anyone will be able to see your change from the outside. You might carry the old color for the rest of your existence, and no one can tell you when or whether it will go. Come back to Megatron. Because everything the franchise has established about eye color, about sparks, about the spectrum from health to corruption to absence, lands differently when you look at him through this lens. The common reading of Megatron is simple: conqueror, tyrant, villain, red eyes to match. The visual language confirmed decades ago. But the lore, across the G1 comics and the aligned continuity and the IDW runs, consistently complicates this reading in ways that matter. Megatron did not begin as a tyrant. In the aligned continuity, he began as a gladiator and a writer, someone documenting the injustice of Cybertron's caste system in pamphlets that circulated underground while he fought for survival above ground. In the IDW continuity, his early movement, the Decepticons before they became the Decepticons as history knows them, was a genuine political force advocating for equality among Cybertronians, a cause that the existing establishment dismissed and then violently suppressed. The red eyes he carries by the time the war is in full motion are not the eyes he was born with. They are the record of what happened between that beginning and this end. The most honest reading of those red eyes is grief. Not the grief that makes you gentle, the grief that makes you dangerous. The grief of a being who was right about the injustice, who was wrong about what the solution required, who made choices that extinguished the right within him even as it consumed the wrong that had provoked him, and who now carries the color of those choices in every close-up the franchise has ever given him. The red eyes are not proof that Megatron was always this. They are proof of how far he came from where he started. The central question, now with the full weight of everything the video has built behind it, if a Transformer's eye color reflects the true state of the spark, then Megatron's red eyes are not a mark of inherent evil. They are the visible record of a transformation, a becoming, a spark that moved from wherever it began to wherever it arrived, through choices and violence and dark energon, and a war that lasted so long that the original cause of it became irrelevant. And the question that those eyes ask, every time they are on screen, is whether the being behind them still contains anything of what they were before the color changed. Whether the movement is complete and permanent, or whether somewhere in that spark, underneath everything the war deposited, there is still a trace of the being who was writing about justice in an underground pamphlet between gladiatorial bouts in Kaon. The lore does not give you a clean answer. It gives you the red eyes and asks you to decide what you think they mean. There is one more piece. Bumblebee. In most continuities, Bumblebee's eyes are the clearest, most saturated blue in the Autobot faction. Not the deep, complex blue of the Autobot commander, which carries weight and history. The small scout's blue is almost transparent, open, the blue of something young and resilient, and not yet worn down by the weight of millions of years of war. He is often positioned as the Autobot the audience enters through. Small enough to be relatable, young enough to be hopeful, the color of his eyes matching the emotional register of someone who has not yet been fully consumed by what this war does to the beings who fight in it. But in several continuities, including the 2018 Origin film, we see this scout without a voice, damaged at the spark-adjacent level in ways that leave him diminished. And even then, even with that damage, the eyes hold, the blue persists. And in the moment of connection, in the moments where he reaches someone or is reached by someone, the eyes brighten. Not to a different color, brighter within the color, more saturated, more present, more alive. This is the franchise's most optimistic statement about eye color. That even damage, even loss, even the things the war does to a spark that are not reversible, do not always take the color. Some sparks hold, some blue survives everything. Picture this. The war has been over for some time, or what passes for over in Transformers lore, which is rarely a clean ending, and more often a fragile pause. An Autobot who has been fighting since before most of the Transformers now alive, where Sparked sits in the ruins of a city that was beautiful once, a city whose name meant something before it meant rubble, and looks out over what remains. The energon veins under the city still pulse faintly, blue-white light moving through the metal beneath the ash. The Autobot's eyes in the stillness and the reflection of that light are the same color they were the day the war began. Worn, yes, carrying more than they were ever designed to carry, but blue still all the way through. Here is what 40 years of Transformers lore has been quietly saying. In every close-up, and every color choice, and every moment where the eyes of these beings have been given more attention than the plot strictly required. The war did not leave any of them unchanged. Not the Autobot commander, who began as an archivist, a being who did not ask for the Matrix and whose eyes have been carrying the weight of that refusal ever since. Blue not because leadership came naturally, but because he has chosen to hold the color against the pressure of everything the war has asked him to become. Not the Decepticon warlord, who began as a gladiator philosopher, and whose red eyes are the record of a transformation so thorough that the being who started it might not recognize the being who carries its conclusion. Not the small yellow scout who has been damaged and restored and damaged again, and who holds blue in his eyes like a fact about himself that the war has not yet managed to disprove. Not any of them. The war lasted millions of years, millions. Not as an abstraction, not as a large number to establish scale, but as a real duration. Human civilization is approximately 10,000 years old. The Cybertronian War lasted hundreds of times longer than that. Longer than our species has been using written language. Longer than we have been building cities, making art, asking questions about what we are and what we owe each other. These beings have been fighting for so long that the original reason for the war has been buried under layers of history, under grief and resentment, and the specific deformations that come from being at war for so long that peace becomes an abstraction. And the eyes show it. Every Transformer who has been in this war long enough carries the record of it in their optical sensors. Not just the faction color, the texture of it, the weight of it. The degree to which the war has deposited something in the spark that does not come out through will alone. The most moving thing the franchise has ever done with eye color is not the dramatic color change, not the moment of corruption or redemption made visible. It is the sustained close-up on eyes that have stayed their original color through everything. Because that is not evidence of being untouched. That is evidence of a fight that the lore never made explicit, a daily decision that the script never quite articulated, to remain the thing you were when you started, to not let the war take that specific piece of you, to hold the color even when the war has taken everything else. The Autobot commander's blue eyes, worn and cold, and carrying more grief than warmth through the later chapters of the story, are still blue. That is not a design choice. That is a statement about endurance, about the cost of endurance, about what it means to maintain your fundamental alignment when the war has been trying to change it for longer than your species has been alive. The blue is not effortless. Nothing about it is effortless anymore. But it is there, and it will be there tomorrow, and that is the most specific kind of heroism the franchise has ever produced. The Transformers franchise has given us many things across 40 years. It has given us the mythology of the Allspark and the Matrix and the 13 Primes. It has given us Cybertron as a concept, a world whose loss is the original wound of the entire story. It has given us two beings who became enemies so gradually and so completely that they can look at each other across a battlefield and neither of them can quite remember who fired first. What it has given us in the eye colors is something quieter and more lasting. It has given us a visual language for the state of the soul, not a simple language. Not a language where blue is always good and red is always evil and the reading is the same every time. A language where the colors are evidence. Evidence of what a being has been through, what has been done to them, what they chose and what was chosen for them, what the war deposited in their spark across a duration that the word long cannot contain. A language that requires you to look carefully, to consider context, to hold the image long enough to see not just the color but the texture behind it. And it is a language that has consequences. Because if eye color is conscience, if it reflects the actual state of the spark rather than the allegiance declared or the insignia worn, then every Transformer in this war is carrying visible evidence of who they have become. Not who they were before, who they are now, today after everything. The wars they have fought, and the losses they have carried, and the choices they have made, and the choices that were made for them. All of it, encoded in the light behind the eyes, readable by anyone willing to look. Here is the question the franchise has been asking since the first time an animator painted an Autobot's optical sensors blue and a Decepticon's red, and it is the question that gets heavier the more you know about the lore behind it. If eye color reflects the true state of the spark, then is there any Transformer in this war whose eyes have not changed in some way from what they were at the beginning? And if not, if the war has changed all of them down to the light behind their eyes, then what does it mean to look at any of them and call their eye color their natural color? Maybe the most honest answer the franchise offers is not about a color at all. It is about the fact that they keep looking. That after millions of years and immeasurable loss and a war so long that both sides have forgotten what peace felt like, these beings still have eyes that produce light. Still have sparks generating something. Still have something that can be read, can be studied, can change. As long as the eyes are lit, the spark is present. As long as the spark is present, the story is not over. What that story is, what it means that these beings have been carrying it for millions of years, with the record of it visible in their optical sensors for anyone patient enough to look, is worth your time and your attention. If you found this exploration worth staying for, stay for what comes next. The lore goes deeper than any single video can contain, and every question answered here opens 3 more.